That's
okay. Let's not dwell on that. The cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, they're in 47 metres of ocean, or approximately off Norfolk Island. In your view, as an independent safety expert, do you find it unusual that the CVR and the FDR wasn't retrieved in this case?
I am, because there's a couple of things, and I'll do it quickly. The first thing is, I just can't find where a turbojet, turbofan aircraft is ditched at night and everyone's lived, and I think we could learn a lot from what the crew did that night. The second thing is, there are so many assumptions in the fuel calculations of this particular flight that, you know, I've had 6 air transport pilots of high experience, and all of them comes out with slightly different answers. You know, it's not an exact science sometimes, but I think the only way we'd really know is from the flight data recorder that we could get from the accident. And I know the ATSB justified that by saying that the crew were alive and they didn't need to get it. Well, I just can't believe that the crew's input into this report is largely not there.
But also, if there is a conflict in terms of information that was supposedly given to the crew, then the cockpit voice recorder might be of some assistance.
Definitely, and the cockpit voice recorder in this case would fill in the gaps that Senator Fawcett was talking about in terms of the human factors, the relationship between the pilot and the co-pilot, their reactions to the ATC's requests or instructions, their lines of thinking, their thought processes, the verbalisations they were doing on the flight deck. We can learn a lot from all of these things, and it's a pity it's sitting in the bottom of the ocean.
You've said in your submission that we cannot afford to, and this is at page 52 of your submission, I quote you, we cannot afford to go back to the 70s style of regulation and investigation. What do you mean by that?
In the 70s and 80s, accident investigation really pointed out pilot error and mechanical error, maintenance errors, things of that nature. Organisational issues and regulatory issues were largely ignored. It was all about the old style way of head kicking pilots, sacking them, training the rest of the pilots, and let's get back to work. And that's what I feel we've come to in this. I mean, I'm of the opinion that Mr James has been singled out grossly unfairly. We all play a part in the aviation system. Me as an independent, the regulator, the operator and the flight crew.
Just for the record, Quinn, and I'm running out of time, can we just go, you have been giving advice of a technical nature along with Mr McQuinn to Dominic James. Are you being paid for the advice that you're giving?
No, I haven't received a cent.
Okay, so you're doing this on a voluntary basis?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. The other issue is the secrecy provisions, because there are some very heavy penalties to discuss draft reports, and obviously you're protected under privilege. In the United States, they have a different approach, and I think other jurisdictions have different approaches. What is the best way? I mean, you can see the rationale in the legislation for those secrecy provisions, so that people, you know, and there's probably there's good reason for it. But what is the balance? How do you have some transparency without fettering the investigators doing their job, particularly in the early stages?
Yeah, I think what the United States do with these publicly open forums, with the draft reports being publicly available, it offers not just the participants to challenge the factual information or the veracity of the analysis, but it also allows other interested people to do that as well. But the beauty of the American system is that you quite often get some really good input from other people who come at it from a different angle that improve the aviation system. And I will say that you also do get some oddball type approaches as well, but you do with any public open forum. But the way the draft report system works here, it's very insular. I don't know what another person submitted, which has necessarily changed the report. Now, in this case, the draft reports have been completely changed to the final report, where we go from one situation where the operator had limited oversight of its operations, and it was completely changed to the operator complied with the oversight operations and consistent with the
And
regulations.
that makes the final report suspect in your view?
Well, we need to have transparency into how the ATSB came to that finding in such a short time. What evidence were they provided that changed their opinion?
And can you give us any insight in the interrelationship between CASA and the ATSB? There's a Miller report in 2007 and MOUs and protocols between the two. Do you think that in your knowledge of the interplay between CASA and the ATSB, do you think that that balance is right, or do you think there are issues there?
If this report is anything to judge that by, no.
In what way?
CASA and the ATSB must necessarily cooperate, but it doesn't mean that they lie in the same bed. What they need to do is have a very healthy respect for one another, but you need a distance to stand off. You do need to be strictly independent in this game because you only get one shot at this stuff. And clearly in this case, when the ATSB has not even mentioned anything about the failure of the life jackets. Now,
That's extraordinary.
it's
in your view.
absolutely extraordinary. And I find it even more extraordinary that CASA let the ATSB not even mention it. And I want to know why. I mean, the life jacket lights didn't work for 8 hours as they're required to. Miss Casey's life jacket only inflated in the left chamber. She held the patient in her right arm for an hour and a half. She's got permanent disabling injuries of her hand. If her other chamber inflated, she would have been able to cradle the patient who didn't have a life jacket. And it's how that information is omitted. It's bizarre.
Okay, and finally, sorry, Pelair had a safety management system. Was that adequately reflected in the final ATSB report in your view?
I don't even think it's mentioned.
Right, we're going to go to a question from Senator Stirl, and if Senator Fawcett and everyone else has concluded, we'll then go in camera. Could I just ask one question? The Chief Operating Officer for Pelair at the time, he'd have been Chief Pilot, sorry. He'd have been consulted for ATSB and CASA to come to a conclusion on the draft report, would he?
I'm not sure, Senator. I'm not sure who the...
But he would bear the ultimate responsibility in Pelair.
Yes, I mean, he's the person that CASA approves to be a chief pilot
you.
and is accountable to the
Senator
regulations.
Stirl.
Thanks, Chair. Just very quickly, Mr Aherne, you said this aircraft is not capable of doing charter work, did you say?
Aerial work.
Aerial work. Can you tell us why it's not capable?
It's the airspace rules at the time in Fiji and New Zealand. You can't plan to go into that airspace. You have to plan to go, in this case, underneath it. The aircraft simply can't get to levels above it and carry enough fuel to get to where it wants to go. But when you plan below it, particularly coming westbound from Samoa to Norfolk Island, the aircraft at the height that it's flying burns so much fuel. We've done the calculations to death. You just can't do it. And at the lower levels that you're flying in the weather. So if there's a thunderstorm cell, you've got to go off track and divert. And we worked out that if you don't even carry taxi fuel and approach fuel, you would have a balance of 11 pounds. And that's not going to even get you a mile, you know. It just can't do it.
Okay, so just very quickly, if I can, Chair. So is there any law that says certain planes can't do certain routes, or is it just hit and
No,
miss?
it's just
Take your luck?
it's the capability of the aircraft. It's the fuel uplift that this particular aircraft is capable of.
Okay, but if there is, well, there has been such an incident, would that not be in CASA's realm to see if the plane was capable of doing that journey?
Well,
To the best of your knowledge.
It's within CASA's realm to certainly put it to the chief pilot, because the chief pilot under law is responsible for the safe operation of the fleet.
I'll leave it at that because of time.
So we'll go into camera, but as we go into camera, so the Chief Pilot, as part of his